There's something so intoxicating about the world of dark academia. Every Pinterest board I've seen, every Instagram that is dedicated to this dark academia theme and vibe is filled with candlelit libraries, gorgeous Gothic architecture, the idea of whispered phrases, especially in like Latin or Greek, from one student to the other student, and the assumption that each of these students is harboring some deadly secret. But I see a lot of questions about what exactly is dark academia. Is it just this aesthetic? Is it a literary genre? Is it a philosophy to follow? And also, why are people so obsessed with it? Today I want to try to break it all down. I want to discuss the origins, the literary foundations, the irony behind romanticizing dark academia, and of course I will give you plenty of book recommendations that fall in the dark academia category. Here is a quick course on dark academia and what it is. The dark academia that we all know and love today is largely shaped on Donna Tartt's 1992 novel, The Secret History. If you've ever heard someone say, "I wish to go to a dark academia university," this novel is probably why. It follows a group of eccentric students who are studying Greek at a New England university, and they become entangled in murder, intellectual obsession, and the dangerous pursuit of knowledge. The Secret History is moody, atmospheric, and riddled with debates about mortality. It is, in many ways, the quintessential dark academia novel. But before The Secret History, the aesthetic had its roots in classic literature. Stories that were obsessed with beauty, knowledge, and existential dread. Think any classic book that dives deep into the human psyche that wrestle with themes of ambition, obsession, and self-destruction. And then you fast forward to the early 2010s, maybe the late 2000s, and dark academia has taken on its whole new life on platforms like Tumblr. It was an aesthetic. Think like tweed blazers, old libraries, classical music, coffee-stained notebooks filled with poetry. But I think during the COVID-19 pandemic, dark academia really got pushed to the mainstream consciousness. A lot of universities shut down or they went completely online. And so people were looking for the dark academia vibe as a form of escapism and romanticizing an education that a lot of people lost access to. And that kind of brings us up to date to today. If dark academia had a literary family tree, it would be these three defining books. Firstly, The Picture of Dorian Gray. This book is all about aesthetics, moral corruption, and indulgence. Themes that fill very dark academia. It's about a man who sells his soul so that he can stay beautiful forever while his portrait decays in his place. If you like moody Gothic settings with a philosophical edge, then this is a must read. And this would be the grandfather book of dark academia. The father book of dark academia, The Secret History. We already talked about this one, but if you want the definitive dark academia novel, this is it. Intellectual elitism, murder, morally gray characters, it's got it all. And the son book would be If We Were Villains. Think The Secret History, but with Shakespearean actors. This book follows a group of theater college students who get wrapped up in real-life tragedy. It's accessible, engaging, and absolutely drenched in drama. But one of the most fascinating aspects of dark academia to me is the irony that these books tend to have on themselves, on their own themes of dark academia, of university, of intellectualism. At its core, this aesthetic is obsessed with elite universities, classical studies, and intellectual pursuit. But most of the people myself included, who love dark academia are not attending Ivy League colleges or discussing Greek tragedies in candlelit rooms. In fact, many of us are consuming it through TikTok, BookTube, Bookstagram, and Tumblr. Platforms that are pretty much the complete opposite of the elitism that dark academia romanticizes. Then there's the issue of academic pressure. Dark academia glorifies the idea of studying till dawn, of dedicating your life to knowledge at the expense of everything else. But the reality for a lot of us is academia is exhausting, it's mentally and financially draining, and yet we still long for this idealized version of it. So is dark academia a critique of academia, or is it a fantasy? I think maybe it's both. Now let's get into books. You already have the grandfather, the father, and the son. These three are typically seen in every dark academia book recommendation video on TikTok and BookTube and Bookstagram. So I'm gonna break it down a little bit more. I'm gonna give you some classic dark academia books, some modern, some easy and accessible, and some more popular versions. The Secret History. This is the gold standard. If you haven't read this yet, I'm jealous of you because you still have the ultimate dark academia experience ahead of you. If we were villains, like The Secret History, but Shakespearean and way more drama and maybe a little bit more pain. Babel. I don't own a copy of this book, but I have read it through Libby. And what if Oxford was a battleground of colonialism, power, and academia itself? And then Ninth House. Secret societies, Yale, and dark magic. The main character Alex can see ghosts. Now, if you want a more classic literature vibe, you get Frankenstein, because what is more dark academia than a scientist playing as God and then being horrified by his own creation? The Picture of Dorian Gray. Once again, Dorian Gray's whole entire vibe is dark academia. Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff is the original brooding dark academia type, except instead of discussing philosophy, he's ruining people's lives out of spite. And then Dracula. This is a gothic horror staple because it kind of combines dark academia with horror by adding the concept of the undead. The Cloisters, which I did not super enjoy, but I thought it was still a really good dark academia addition to the genre. It follows our main character. She gets a research job in a museum. There's some magic aspects with tarot cards and a deep obsession with fate. There's A Lesson in Vengeance. It takes place at an elite boarding school. There's Dead Girls and a more witchy dark academia vibe. The Atlas Six. This is 6 magicians who are competing for a spot in a secret society where knowledge is power. Now, if you want dark academia with a more philosophical literary vibe, you get Notes from the Underground, which is much more of existential crisis. Stoner. This is a book about a man who dedicates his life to academia and gets very little in return. The Master and Margarita. The devil walks into Russia and basically turns academia on its head. It's very satirical, but also very brilliant. And then some honorable mentions that are book talk favorites. Bunny, The Raven Boys, and Mexican Gothic. I did read Bunny, and I think it was a good addition to the magical side of dark academia, but I don't think it is a true classic dark academia genre. And the other two, The Raven Boys and Mexican Gothic, I have not read. So I think dark academia is more than just an aesthetic. It's a true reflection of our very complicated relationship with knowledge, ambition, and nostalgia. Whether you love dark academia for the books, for the fashion, for the decor, for the true academia core vibes, there's no denying that it has carved and created its own very interesting place in literature and culture. So tell me, what's your favorite dark academia read? Or if you're just starting out, which dark academia book are you most excited to read? Bye!